I have not always had my financial life together. However, there were a few lessons that I've learned along the way that completely changed the equation. So let's talk about them. Number one, thou shalt not keep secrets. And I mean this in terms of you and your spouse or anyone you're sharing a financial life with, but also between you and you. As in the you that's making the budgets and the you that's stopping at the gas station because she's hangry, or the you that's online shopping at Amazon at 2 a.m. because she can't sleep. Like, that you can't keep secrets from this you. They have to know everything. When I first started budgeting, I just made a list of all my expenses and made sure that my income number was higher than my expenses number. And I figured that was good. That was a budget. Once you start trying to actually have goals, like saving for retirement or paying off debt or buying a house, like once you start having goals, that kind of budgeting isn't going to work as well. It might, but it's not going to be as effective as a different style of budgeting where there's no secrets. So when my husband and I first started a real budget that was zero-based, accounted for every single dollar, no dollar could hide. Once we started that, we used a budgeting software. I know we've tried a couple of them. I'm not gonna say one is better than the other today, but anything that connected to our bank account, so anytime he swiped, I could see. Anytime I swiped, he could see. No secrets. That level of accountability totally changed our game because it meant that we couldn't mindlessly spend because our spouse would know. And we had a big goal. We wanted me to be able to stay home and be a stay-at-home mom. And we had a lot of debt to pay off to make that happen. And so it wasn't that either of us was looming over the other one going, why'd you spend? Why'd you spend? It was our goal looming over, why'd you spend? And so for the first time, I actually could stick to a budget because I had that motivation of someone else would see what I was doing. Just without judgment, but someone else would see. I couldn't hide from myself and I couldn't hide from them. Game changer. Rule number 2, you must value the needs of your future self and your present self equally. So my husband and I need this rule for opposite reasons because I am more tempted to value my future self more highly. I want to save, and neglect my current self to make sure future self is okay. My husband is more likely to value his present self and make sure his current needs are met, is less mindful of what his future self's needs might be. But recently, he came up with this phrase, and it exactly described the situation we found ourselves in, is in finding this middle ground. You need to have your present self and your future self valued equally, because you are important now, and you will be important later. And neither one of your needs are less important. You can't exactly predict what you might need in the future, but you can evaluate carefully your current needs today. Which brings me to rule number 3. Rule number 3 is know your wants versus your needs, and if you aren't sure if it's a want or a need, defend it to somebody else. So the place I see this one a lot is in a lot of these online communities, frugal communities on Reddit or Facebook. There are places where people will post their budget and say, here's my budget. What else can I be doing? I can't figure out where the holes are, what's going on. And oftentimes what I see in a lot of these, because I like to be the person who gives advice in those communities, because I've had some experience, I've done a few things, I kind of know how to save money pretty well. By the way, if you'd be interested in that kind of thing, like sharing your budget and me offering some ideas, either in a video or whatever, let me know, because I'm curious about that, if anyone would be interested. But a lot of people in these communities will post their budgets, and the first thing they say is, here's my budget, but my streaming services can't leave. I'm paying this money for an extra dog. That's a need. We can't get rid of that. What else did I see recently? There was one I saw recently where there was a woman who says, here's my budget. We're about ready to get on food stamps, but none of the streaming services can go. We do need those. But it was 12 different streaming services for almost $90 a month. She's like, no, we need all 12 of those. Sometimes when you're trying to evaluate your wants versus your needs, I don't know if you've ever done this, but you say to yourself, I don't want to get rid of it, so it must be a need. It's not quite how it works. It's not a popular thing. No one wants to hear that, right? Sure, half of you already left the video now. That's okay. I'll keep talking to the other half. Just because you don't want to get rid of it doesn't make it a need. Now, to be fair, there is no set in stone list of needs for every single person. There are things that may be a need for one person and may not be a need for another person. For example, if I was blind or visually impaired, I would have a lot more needs than I have now, like maybe apps on my phone to be a screen reader or whatever that I need to pay for because I can't do life easily without it. Whereas me right now, buying some fancy apps would just kind of be a fun thing. It's not a need. Needs are different between different people. But if you're trying to figure out whether you have a really strong want or an actual need, maybe talk to someone else and see if you can defend why it's such a need to you. Someone who loves you, but will also love you enough to tell you the truth. By the way, is this video being useful yet? Because you can leave a like if it is. But also, people who are miscategorizing their wants versus their needs are not stupid. They're not selfish. They're not lazy. It's more often than not what I'm reading between the lines and seeing is that it's a lack of awareness of a different method of living. If every single person around you owns item A, it starts to look like it is necessary for you to own item A. It's not even just keeping up with the Joneses, although that can be part of it, but it's a lack of imagining what your life could look like without that A. If you've never lived in a neighborhood where even one person doesn't have a dishwasher, you're going to assume a dishwasher is a necessity. Whereas, of course, we know it's not. This is also why, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but this is also why I see people when they've gone to other countries and are exposed to different ways of living, especially countries that are in the developing world, and you realize how people can get by with far less than you have, you start to see your wants versus your needs a little differently. Even if you don't go to the developing country, even if you go volunteer at a soup kitchen for a while and you work with, the homeless people who live in our own backyards, once you start being exposed to how little other people have, you start to see your wants and your needs a little bit differently. Frugal rule number 4 that changed my life. My money is not just for me, which sounds a little bit crazy, but once I started thinking about money as something entrusted to me, feeling responsible for what I do with that money has been very eye-opening in the way I view what I do with it and whether or not I'm just wasting it, because I feel that weight. If this money is not just for me and I just blew $20 on something stupid that didn't even make me happy, that feels heavier when I think about how the money is supposed to help others, not just myself. So when I got married, I started thinking about it as our money. That was the first exposure I had to it. Like, oh, it's not just mine, it's ours. And then when we had children, I had to again expand that circle of influence and be like, this money that we make is not just for me and for him, it is for us. And there's a much greater responsibility that comes with being a parent financially. And so it's just extrapolating that. If you're one of the people who sees humanity as a giant family and we all have to take care of each other and things like that extends to the financial life too. I have started to become a much less wasteful person when I take on that broad perspective. I think that's for the best. I think it's good to be taking care of other people, especially this time of year, but all the time. But being prudent and not giving $100 to every single person you see holding a sign on the street. Being thoughtful about the charities you're donating to. There's a lot of good that you can do with your money. And there's probably a lot of bad you can do with your money in the name of being good. And so being thoughtful and cautious and not get swindled. So what about you? What are some of the money rules that you live your life by that have really made a difference? All right, guys, I'll send you to this video next if you want some more frugal money rules to live by. And I will see you next week. Bye, YouTube.